So on the line right now, the panel, we have Solomon Asamoah, who is the Chief Executive Officer and CEO rather, of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. He's waving there. Hopefully you can all see him. Solomon,
yeah.
there you go. Solomon was the former Vice President of the African Development Bank and also headed up the African Finance Corporation Infrastructure Fund out of Nigeria. We also have Solomon, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Egyptian Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. I think everyone's on mute, Eamon, but I'm sure they've noted you.
Thanks a lot, Solomon, for your efforts.
Okay. We also have Robin Good from the Telkom Pension Fund in South Africa.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. Hi. We have Matiza, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Erskine Provident Pension Fund from South Africa.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thanks,
Good.
Hubert.
You're welcome, Linda. We have David Nyoma, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pension Fund, Government Institutions Pension Fund of Namibia.
Hello, hi, everyone.
We have Duncan Bonfield, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the International Federation of Sovereign Wealth Funds in London.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Hubert.
Hello.
Thanks. And we have Israel Marufu from Zimbabwe Pension Fund.
It's bigger than initially listed.
Okay. We have colleagues from Ithmar Capital, the Moroccan Sovereign Wealth Fund on the line. I don't know who from the fund is present, but hope you're all welcome. We have Loha Khalil, who is the CRO from the Egyptian Sovereign Wealth Fund. We have Angela Miller-May from the Chicago Pension Fund, Teachers Pension Fund in the United States.
How do we record this?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good. And John, I'm not sure if we introduced you, but we also have John Denton, who is the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce. That might be a double roll call, but
Is Maggie here?
okay. We also have Richard Mwinga, who's the former director from the Zambian Public Service Pension Fund.
How are you?
Okay, very good, thank you.
How do we record this?
Hi, Demba just joined.
Okay, excellent. We also have Demba Diallo, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Senegalese Sovereign Wealth Fund, Strategic Investment Fund, FONSIS, on the line.
Hi.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. We also have Nicholas Fursley, who is the Director General of the World Pensions Council on the line. Welcome, Nicholas.
Okay.
Fantastic. So I think with that brief call, hopefully we can commence our dialogue. And thank you everybody for your participation and making the time. Start by on behalf of Africa Investors saying it's a great to welcome you to the African Sovereign Wealth and Pension Fund Leaders Forum COVID-19 virtual roundtable. You know, our focus today is really going to be on Roll call again. If I can just ask everyone to please, at this stage, mute their microphones. And then as we ask you to speak as a panel speaker or a discussant, we will call on you. Fantastic. So coming straight into the subject, as we know, the COVID-19 epidemic is having a great impact on the continent economically, which has been compounded by the oil shock, which is precipitated quite a tragic set of circumstances for the private sector, in particular the small and medium-sized enterprises. We know from research that the estimates indicate that African economies' GDP is potentially going to decline from 3 to 8% in 2020 as a consequence of COVID-19, resulting in a consequent suffering of paralysis for the economies of between 90 to $200 billion, according to the estimates in the market. So the shock will naturally squeeze the fiscal space quite dramatically in the continent, as deficits are estimated to widen from essentially 3.5 to 4.9 percentage points, increasing Africa's financing gap by an additional $110 to $154 billion this year. With that in mind, let's indicate that Africa's total public debt could increase under the base case scenario from about 1.86 trillion by the end of 2019 to a situation now which could be over 2 trillion in 2020, which is compared to the 1.9 trillion projected in a no pandemic scenario. And if you look at the African Development Bank's report, these figures could actually reach 2.1 trillion in 2020 under a worst case scenario. So naturally, I'm glad to have all of your fine minds and resources and commitment to helping us think through as an industry some of the bold actions that we will need to consider and put forward as solutions and implement where appropriate. The impact of the global pandemic on African economies includes the disruption of global supply chains, being exposed to inputs from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as lower demand in global markets for a wide range of African exports that are likely to be delayed or reduced as the foreign direct investment is redirected by international partners, redirecting capital locally. And as we know, on a practical level, returning businesses to operational health in the so-called new normal after a severe shutdown is an extremely challenging and complex exercise. But if any community has the ability to support our economies, governments, and policymakers plan for and anticipate long-term investment needs and priorities, so our economies can essentially stabilize, grow, and thrive again, I believe that many of you on this call, many of you on this round table will have a significant role to play in helping us address and helping the continent and helping your institutions and the globe ultimately, recover from this situation. We have unparalleled experience in long-term and investing, and I think this is going to be invaluable as the policymakers call on the industry to get a better clarity about how they can engage with us as the asset owners and the long-term institutional investors, that will be critical in terms of paving the way for the new normal. This will take collaboration, coordination, and an intimate focus on the correlation, something that we're hearing a great deal now. We've seen the world coordinate when it comes to reconstituting an economy that is a very complex makeup from the real economy, SMEs to large corporates to public and private markets. There are a lot of correlations that we all will need to be focused on and have a good handle on. But that being said, we are long-term asset owners and financial investors. We naturally need to defend our ability to fight for our members and our future generations. There are a number of initiatives afoot at the moment calling for a deferment of loan principles in the market at the moment for key institutions during this year. But what we also know is that whatever financial arrangements we end up with, particularly for commercial debt, we will eventually need to contemplate a scenario of engaging with the Paris Club. And with that, there are natural implications which mean that there will be a dwindling number of banks that will be prepared to lend to countries in crisis. That being said, there are a number of domestic and international initiatives we can take inspiration from. For example, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority has been approved to make a contribution, an allocation of $150 million for the stabilization fund for Nigeria to fight COVID-19. Yesterday, the African Union and a private sector group I'm part of has established a COVID-19 response fund, which is a 150 million initially, but it will grow to 400 million. We have seen a very significant leadership position taken by the African Development Bank, who have recently listed a COVID-19 social bond on the London Stock Exchange, and yesterday announced that they have established and been given board approval for a $10 billion COVID-19 response fund. We've also seen the African Export Import Bank establish a $3 billion COVID-19 trade facility to help governments be able to continue to meet their trade responsibilities during this testing time. And from the international funds and sovereign wealth funds, we've seen example pension fund side from Caisse de Dépôt of Quebec, CDPQ of Quebec, who have established a $4 billion facility for investments for locally affected businesses, which is running alongside a $300,000 community donation. We've also seen one of the Russian sovereign wealth funds, the Russian Direct Investment Fund, making direct investments to diagnostic systems for the detection of COVID-19 as an international effort. This roundtable today is essentially designed to provide a brief update on the global business responses and the priorities to fight COVID-19 and explore the practical steps and recommendations of current initiatives that are being taken on the continent, and of course to go into some detail on the role of African institutional investors and the role that African asset owners can play in responsibly fighting the COVID-19. Our focus will be on this roundtable will be to generate some recommendations, principally in two areas. The immediate priority responses, firstly, will be focused on, with a particular focus on actions to protect African capital markets, SMEs, supply chains, and the African continental free trade area. How to protect these aspects from the economic fallout of the crisis. And secondly, to look at partnerships with regulators. A lot of those initiatives that I've just outlined, and I know that there are many more. I'm sure we'll hear some other suggestions and initiatives from you on the call. But a number of the policymakers, the regulators, are really looking to hear the voice of the institutional investment community as an industry to help inform them as they think about fostering the industry shifts to the next normal regulatory environment that's going to be required to rebuild our economies so that they can stabilize, grow, and ultimately thrive. So to address these issues on today's roundtable, we'll be led by a number of discussion leaders who will share their perspectives and recommendations on these major areas and themes. Just by way of quick introduction of the actual discussion leaders, it will be Uche Orji, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. Are you there, Orji? Uche? We'll be calling back into you. Who we know is on the line, a good colleague, Mkwi Wagacha, who is the former acting chair of the board of the Central Bank of Kenya and the former chair of the Kenyan Sovereign Wealth Fund. We have David Nyoma, who is the CEO and principal officer of the Government Institutions Pension Fund of Namibia. We have Eamon Solomon, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Sovereign Fund of Egypt. And we have John Denton, who is the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris, the World Business Organization. And we have Nick Fursley, who is the Director General of the World Pensions Council out of Paris. And last but by no means least, we have Duncan Bonfield, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the International Federation of Sovereign Wealth Funds. Then we understand, and I think it's become through very clearly on this call, the importance of co-investing and really being able to use our expertise as investors and recognizing that there is going to be deficits of capital and liquidity in the market. And through co-investing and investing in each other's markets around key critical sectors, which everyone has identified as infrastructure, care, and those with an ESG dynamic and dimension is certainly going to be a great opportunity. So I think we've got some very concrete suggestions and recommendations. I'd like to propose that we convene, as Linda has mentioned, again shortly. I'll circulate something and see if we can find a date and time that works for everybody, and we can still an agenda around some of these key recommendations. Similar to Solomon, I think you hit the nail on the head. Let's drive digitization. If the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund is going to be one of the anchor investors, let's put a co-investment approach to that. Gerald, to your point, I think you're talking about key concrete opportunities. Let's, as the constituency, put whatever we can on the table in opportunities in our own markets or where we have expertise, both from the policy standpoint and the transaction standpoint, and see if we can make a clear contribution to the fight, not only about the crisis today, but building the economies that we want for tomorrow. I think with that said, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'd like to thank you for your time and participation. Over, but it just goes to show your commitment and passion for the subject that we are dealing with, and you can count on us, as I believe I can count on each of you, for us to make a market contribution. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your days. This formally closes the roundtable. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.